Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me this evening. I do realize this was supposed to be on Sunday night, but then I'd forgotten I'm not going to be here on Sunday night. So I've moved it to the Wednesday instead. So a little bit of a surprise for people, but I do hope that's okay. Normal service will be resumed as soon as possible. This evening, I'm going to be looking at unhelpful thinking habits, some of the default settings, if you will, whenever something happens, something comes up, the way we think about things. I'm going to give some general ideas. There may be some you recognize. I think we all do them from time to time, but it's good to recognize they are a habit and there are ways to challenge them. So I'll go through some common unhelpful thinking habits, and I'm going to give some ideas to help challenge that, to cognitively reframe the way we think. It's not that we don't think about something, sometimes it's how we are thinking about it. And then at the end, I have a follow-up on an announcement I made a few live streams ago about an upcoming event in Liverpool with Richard Grannon. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that if anybody would like to attend or watch it being streamed and so on. So let's get stuck right in. Unhelpful thinking habits. So what would make a habit, or what would make a way of thinking, what would make it unhelpful in the first place? Well, it could be unhelpful in the sense that it's not necessarily helping us to figure things out, to navigate through something. It could be we are assuming the worst. We are expecting something. We are filling in the blanks in our own head. So there's a lot of different things could be going on. So I'm going to begin by just listing a few of them. And the first one, which is I think is common to all of us in some degrees, is catastrophizing. Now, catastrophizing is when we always assume the worst. It is the worst case scenario. We're thinking about something hasn't even happened yet. It could be a meeting we have to go to, or in work or something like that, and we assume it's going to go badly. We're going to get a dressing down. We might even lose our job or whatever. What we do is we start to create this narrative in our head, and we start to think, well, if he says this, I'll do that, and if she says this, then I'm going to say that. It's like we're risk assessing. We're trying to cover all of the bases. So catastrophizing, as I say, it's assuming the worst. It's like sometimes we catch a cold and we start to imagine it's going to be pneumonia or something. It's going to be something terrible. We'll never recover from it. We're out of breath. We've just ran up the stairs or something like that. We're out of breath. We're gasping for breath, and we assume we're going to have a heart attack. So it's really it's not just negative thinking. There's a step more than that. It's assuming the worst in almost every situation. And it can be a habit that we get into, in the sense that maybe there have been times when something has been quite bad, something has been difficult, something has been painful. It didn't turn out the way we would have hoped. It could be that we have been surrounded by very negative people who always tell us it's going to be the worst. We shouldn't try, whatever. We shouldn't do this, whatever way. It's going to blow up in our face. So it's a habit we can fall into very, very quickly, always assuming the worst. And it's usually based on little to no evidence. The next one would be overgeneralizing. When we're generalizing, again, we all do this on some level, and I've just done it by saying we all do it on some level. But when we overgeneralize, it's like saying it's always this. It's never that. Nothing ever works out for me. Nothing ever goes my way. This person always does this. That person always says that. So what we're doing when we're generalizing, especially when we're overgeneralizing, is we're not paying attention. We're not paying attention to the exceptions. There could be times when it often happens, but not always. Again, when you think of overgeneralizing, just like the catastrophizing, nothing ever works out for me. And yet there have been times when things have worked out. Things have worked out. They might not have worked out brilliantly, but they worked out quite well. And if we're not paying attention to those things, we're always going to make those kind of assumptions. Then there can be all or nothing thinking. Now, again, a lot of people watch my channel. A lot of the questions I ask, a lot of topics I cover are in and around narcissism. And often you find with narcissism, it is all or nothing thinking. It's you're either my friend or you're my enemy. You're either good for me or you're bad to me. If you don't agree with me, that makes you a bad person. That's pretty much all or nothing thinking. If this doesn't work out well for me right now, I might as well just quit. I might as well give up. If I don't get the outcome I want immediately, it's going to require too much effort. All or nothing thinking can really limit. It's like going back to the narcissistic person we're discussing, that we would be talking about. Trying to discuss something with someone who thinks in very all or nothing ways can be very, very difficult. It's like a very blinkered view of the world. Next one would be personalizing. Personalizing is when something happens, we believe we are responsible for it. We start to think, what did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? What could I have done better? What could I have done differently? Whenever we're personalizing, it's like if we don't get asked somewhere, we assume it's because they don't like us, not necessarily because whatever the situation or the event was, we wouldn't be interested in it, or it had nothing to do with us, or whatever. We assume it's something to do with me, something about me that they don't like. An example I used in a previous live stream was, like, you say hello to someone and they don't answer, and you assume you've done something wrong. There's something bad about you, when in reality, that person might just not have seen you, might not have heard you. They could have been lost in their own head. There could have been anything going on. But we personalize things. Like, again, even you meet someone and they're very grumpy, they're in a bad mood, and you assume it's something you've done wrong. Or you look at the look on someone's face on their way out the door. You think you've done something to upset them. Now, they could have indigestion for all you know, but we assume that we have done something. Everything is about us, and we are responsible for it. Even again, those narcissistic people in our lives that behave the way they do, they're very good at dumping things on the other people and making other people responsible for how they feel and how they react and all the rest of it. It's a very easy habit to fall into whenever that sort of thing is dumped on us, so that we start to take responsibility. Another one would be jumping to conclusions. Now, jumping to conclusions, it's almost like mind reading sometimes. Again, the look on someone's face on the way out the door. We jump to the conclusion that we have done something to upset them. And as I say, they might have indigestion, or they might be thinking about something else. We can also, going back to the catastrophizing, it's almost like predicting the future as well. We jump to a conclusion. This doesn't feel good, therefore it must be something bad. Or I don't have all of the information, therefore there's something I'm missing, which could be disastrous. If somebody does or says something, we assume we know their intent. You might find this a lot in social media. Somebody puts up a post, and a lot of people, start to pile on them, give them a hard time or whatever. It's like they've jumped to this conclusion. They know who that person is. They know everything about them. They know their personality type. They know their history. They know what they're going to do next and the sort of person they are and all the rest of it, based on maybe, 10, 20 words of text. That's jumping to a conclusion. Very different from coming to a conclusion, I would like to add. We can come to a conclusion based on different bits of evidence and so on. But jumping to a conclusion is when we just make a lot of assumptions. There's labeling. And I think this is, again, maybe this is human nature, but what we do is we will label things as good, bad, right, wrong. If we do something bad, or we do something that doesn't work out, it's probably a better way of putting it. I'm bad. I'm a bad person. Or, somebody does something and it's like some kind of act of kindness, generosity, whatever. They are a good person. It's the thing about good people and bad people. And I think this is something you learn as you get a bit older. You can tell from my gray hair, I've been around for a bit. When it comes to good and bad, you start to learn at some point that good people are capable of doing, inappropriate things, saying inappropriate things. Bad people can be capable of acts of kindness, generosity, and so on. A lot of the time, it's kind of subjective, and it kind of be of the moment. It could be situational, but we do still label, which is why we see when we think of our presuppositions. How would I describe? Yeah. Okay. An example I've just thought of. It's like if you're listening to two politicians talking on television, they're debating something, they're arguing about something. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. You've decided which one of them is right based on who you vote for. And it's something that we all do, on some level, because we label one of them as good and right, and they know the right thing. We label the other one as not knowing what they're talking about, they're being disingenuous and things like that. There is also, I'm going to split this one into two. Whenever something happens, we could have a negative focus. And whenever we're doing this, we're what's known as filtering. We're filtering out certain things, but only allowing in some things. When we dwell on things like the negative side of something, it's like 9 really good things happen during the day. One bad thing happens, and we think that that's ruined our day. The whole day has been ruined. I guess, depending on what it is, of course, But it's like we're filtering out the 9 other things, the good things that happen, and we're only focusing on that negative part. Whenever something is happening, again, going back to the catastrophizing, something's happening, we assume it's not going to go well because there is a negative focus. What we're doing is we're also discounting the positive. It's like someone passes their driving test. Well, congratulations, you passed your driving test. And they say, well, it was my 3rd attempt. Well, the person didn't ask how many times did you have to take the test. They're just saying, congratulations, you passed. Somebody's wearing a new top, a new shirt, whatever it is, and someone compliments them. That looks nice on you. And they say, well, I bought it in a sale. Deflecting and discounting the positive things. The 9 positive things that happen no longer matter. It's the one thing that we're focusing on. The fact that someone is complimenting us, we tend to deflect that. We might even remember a time they said something that might have been sarcastic and hurtful, and that's what we're looking at it through. Even when we do achieve something, maybe it succeeds quite well, rather than saying, well, I was maybe in the right place at the right time, and I utilized my skills, I did this, that, and the other. What we're actually doing, we might just say, well, I just got lucky. Or I was lucky they didn't find out what I did wrong, or, if it hadn't have been for this, again, we're discounting the part that we played in it, the fact that we had to use some kind of skill. And, there's an expression, this thing about being lucky. Do you ever notice the harder you work, the luckier you get? Yeah, well, we discount the fact that we've worked quite hard at something, that we have put in a lot of effort, we've made a lot of sacrifice and so on. So we're discounting those things. And even, something does go well, we do succeed, we're still looking at the bits we don't have. We try very hard, we apply for a job, we get the job, and we're maybe happy for a moment, this is brilliant, we got a job. But then we start thinking, well, what's going to happen when they find out that I'm no good at that kind of work? What happens when they find out I'm a fraud? What happens when I start to mess up? So there's that negative focus, always focusing on what could go wrong and discounting any of the positives. As I said earlier on, the exceptions, the evidence to the contrary, we kind of discount that. And then there is, as I talked last time on a live stream, being our own worst critic, our own harshest judge. And we're saying things like, I should this, I must that. I should be able to, I should have known. And when we're talking to ourselves like that, I think we're putting ourselves under a lot of strain. We're paying a lot of attention to sometimes quite difficult, unreasonable, even maybe impossible standards. that critic is always going to berate us for not doing something 150%. Like 100% isn't enough. We have to we start berating ourselves that it wasn't 150%. Something just came to me just as I'm saying that. I know I'm going to be looking at ways to reframe some of these thinking habits, but when you're telling yourself things like you should, you must, you have to, you ought to. Some are a given, by the way. Some we do really have to do. But things like I should be perfect. In reality, perfection doesn't exist. It's not real. Things like I should have known. Well, I don't know, unless you're clairvoyant or something. When you find yourself asking questions like, or saying things to yourself like, I should this and I should that, it doesn't do any harm to ask yourself a question like, well, why should I? That's not being flippant. That's not saying you don't care. That's a serious question. Why should I? Why is it important? Who is it's really judging you? Are you really judging yourself? Because you can say the same things in a way of reframing it. You can, rather than I should, I'd like to, I'll try to, I hope to, I want to. Whenever we start saying the same thing, but using a different language, sometimes it's a little bit softer. We're not so harsh on ourselves. So the other one, as I say, was being our own worst critic. A lot of the time when we are engaging in unhelpful thinking habits, I think what we're really doing is we're filtering. As I say, we're filtering out the positive. We're only allowing in the negative. We're only getting ready, preempting for the worst thing that could happen. It's almost, there is something to be said for, what's the expression? You don't expect too much, and that way you won't be disappointed. Well, if you don't expect too much, you probably won't do too much. It's not nice being disappointed, but if you don't at least try, if you don't at least put in the effort, if you don't at least prepare for success, chances are you're going to go at something with a half-assed attempt, and it'll be hit or miss whether or not it succeeds. So that is just a list of very common unhelpful thinking habits. And there are plenty more, and there's different variations on them. Again, the shoulds, the musts, the catastrophizing, the magnification of the difficulties, which rather than just being an obstacle to navigate around or through, we see it as some kind of insurmountable mountain or something. There's no way we can get through it. But I think the biggest one, other than the catastrophizing, I think the biggest one, and this is something that we all do on some level, but those narcissistic people in your life that you might have had to deal with, a lot of the time what you would be dealing with is a thinking habit known as emotional reasoning. And that's when we're telling ourselves, it's true because I think it. It's true because I feel it. We all do it on some level, as I say, but I'll explain it in the context of narcissism. Narcissistic people, because they struggle with empathy, because they have a lack of empathy, it doesn't always necessarily mean they just don't care about other people. That's only part of it. The lack of empathy also can lead to a lack of insight. In other words, they know that they might be upset, they know they're hurting, but they don't necessarily know why. They can't necessarily name it. They just know that it feels bad. That's why a lot of things gets dumped out onto other people. Other people get blamed. And if you're having an argument, if you're having a discussion, and that person's very, very upset, a lot of the time what you're dealing with is emotional reasoning. Again, good people do good things, bad people do bad things, things like that. If I don't feel good about it, it must be really bad. And that there's a lack of emotional regulation as well, in the sense that a disappointment isn't just, well, maybe I have to try harder, maybe I have to do better. It's almost like it's crushingly shameful. In our own context, whenever we're emotionally reasoning, again, we could be so hypervigilant, we could be so used to being berated, We could be so used to being called out for being wrong, for being selfish and things like that. Whenever we start to feel a certain way, there's a little bit of us might be doing the same thing. We feel anxious. So, anxiety is feeling uncertain. It's feeling a lack of control. It can be feeling helpless. It can be feeling a lot of different things. But because we feel a level of anxiety, it's like, again, we start to jump to conclusions. It must be bad. I feel this way, therefore it must mean something really bad is happening. Or we start to feel angry. It must mean because something terrible and awful has happened. By the way, it could, but it's not really in proportion, if you know what I mean. So emotional reasoning is really whenever we're saying it's true because I feel it. It's true because I think it. We're not really regulating how we feel. Those difficult people in our lives, we're struggling to regulate how they feel. That's why sometimes you get the most bizarre kind of accusations and things like that. So that's a list of very, very common thinking habits. Now, where it's a live stream, so I'm going to go through some ways to help challenge this thinking. But as I'm doing it, if there's any thinking habits that I haven't missed, they're just very common ones, very general ones. If there's any I've missed, by all means, add them because it would be good to share them. Even if there's any that you recognize yourself doing from time to time. It's like I say, the unhelpful thinking habits we all do at some level from time to time. Again, jumping to conclusions, filtering out certain things, assuming the worst. We all do it on some level. So ways to challenge these things. Some questions, if you want to write them down, or you can go back and listen to this again and take a note. First one is, whatever it is you're thinking, again, first question is, where's the evidence for it? How do you know? This is the thing about evidence. A very strong feeling is not evidence. Working it out in your head is not evidence. You might have evidence. That's what you're paying attention to. If you have real evidence. When you have evidence, what you're not doing is you're not emotionally reasoning. Again, you're not jumping to conclusions. You're not creating narratives. So you look at what evidence would you have for it, but also what evidence might you have against? Sometimes we might not have evidence either way. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we don't. And sometimes we could, again, asking ourselves about the exceptions. Nothing ever works out for me. That's not entirely true. There's a lot of maybe big things in your life haven't worked out, but there have been other things that have. Sometimes even little small things work out for us. So it's worth paying attention to those little exceptions. Stepping outside of yourself can sometimes be helpful, because whenever we are engaged, whenever we're engaged in something, we're really focused on something and it's really troublesome, it's really bothering us. I often think it's like what we're doing is we're looking through a tube. All you can see is what's at the end of that tube, and that's the only thing we can focus on. When someone else is struggling with something, they're the ones looking through the tube. You can see the bigger picture. So one of the ways to help remove that tube is, imagine if you're a friend, your best friend, family member, someone you really care about, whoever it is, partner, one of your kids, and they come to you and they tell you the same thing that you're struggling with. They tell you the same thing or the same kind of thing. You ask yourself, what advice would you give them? Because they're the ones looking through the tube. You can see the bigger picture. When you take that tube away, the thing you're looking at, the problem you're looking at, the issue, it hasn't went away. It is still there. But you see it in a completely different context. You can see the bigger picture. You can see things like cause and effect. You can see options, choices, resources. You can see a lot of different things. You can even see, whether or not it really is a priority. So stepping outside of yourself is imagining the advice you would give someone else. The other thing about that, do you ever notice we're very good at giving other people advice? We very rarely follow our own advice. Yeah, you imagine if it is someone else, and how would you support them? How would you advise them? Going back to what I was saying earlier on about the shoulds and the musts. Yeah. Why should I? Why must I? Why ought I? you're putting it into a context. You're being honest with yourself, because sometimes, well, I should, because if I don't, other people will disapprove of me. Depending on what it is, that could well be true. However, who are those people and why is it important? When we are trying to get the regard of people who really could not care less about us, sometimes you really need to ask yourselves, why am I doing this? There are some people who do not want, again, a lot of people watching my channel, they'll know what I'm talking about. They just want you to look at your feet. They don't want you to lift your head. They do not want you to aim for anything. They just want you to look at your feet and aim for the floor. Do not do too well. The last thing they want you to do is something that they think is going to outshine them, and that's nonsense. It's not going to happen. But there are some people, and they only feel superior if they're feeling better than others. So you be honest with yourself as to why you should or why you shouldn't. And if it is someone else's point, it's fear of their opinions, again, you need to be honest with yourself. I've said quite a few times that it's not that we need to be accepted. It's human nature. We want to be accepted, but it's not necessarily the need to be accepted. It's the fear of being rejected. And when you look at the caliber of some of the people you fear rejecting you, well, you don't look at where they are, who they are. You don't look at what they're doing. Look at the caliber of their character. Look at how they behave. Look at how they treat you. Are they really the sort of person you want to accept you? Really? Because that might cost you more than you're prepared to give. I really do start to go on sometimes. I'm sorry, I'll get back to the point. Ways to challenge this. When it comes to things like the overgeneralizing, look at previous history. Because sometimes it's what's known as an irrational belief. I talked about this in a previous live stream. One of them being, it happened before, it will happen again. Not it happened before, so it could happen again. There is the possibility or whatever, but it happened before, it will happen again. And sometimes the generalization is based on some of those experiences. I failed my driving test when I was 18. Therefore, I will fail it for the rest of my life. Silly example, but I hope you get what I mean. This person lied to me. That means that person is going to lie to me as well. Is that overgeneralizing? Is that based on previous experiences? And if that's the case, it could be because there's part of us still stuck back in that place, which might mean a little bit of memory updating, looking at who you are and where you are now, looking at the differences now, looking at the experience and the wisdom you've grown since. When it comes to the filtering, looking at the negative side of things. Now, a lot of people talk about the power of positivity, and I have no issue with that. I think, yeah, I'm all for positive thinking. However, I prefer to think in terms of balanced thinking, because if we only ever look at the negative, what we're doing is we are ignoring things like resources, support, opportunities, things like that. If we only ever look at the positive, well, maybe we're in denial or something. So I think looking for that middle path. Yeah, there may be positive and there may be negative. How do you use the positive to help you navigate through or around the negative? Going into the realms a little bit of Stoicism, which is things I've talked about before. The situation you're in, maybe being honest with yourself and asking yourself, is this mine to control in the first place? Is this mine to change in the first place? Again, you think of people, we cannot change people. We can encourage them, we can motivate them, we can influence them. That's as much as we can do. We cannot change people. We cannot change the past. There are some things we really cannot change, but we look at what we can change. We might change our approach to something. We might change direction. We can change a lot of different things. We can change how we behave towards something. A lot of things we can do, but there are some situations that are not within our control. We need to be honest with ourselves. Even the things that aren't within our control might still bring up a little bit of distress. However, that distress maybe starts to reduce when we become a little bit more accepting of it, that it's not ours to change. The thing about acceptance, keep on saying this, accepting something doesn't mean you approve of it, nor does it mean you're okay with it. It just means you're not kicking against it anymore. You're accepting it is what it is. You're acknowledging it is what it is. And then you're now free to change something. Another thing to look at, going back to those past situations, those past interactions, those past things that have happened that may be influencing the here and now, is asking yourself how you dealt with it. One way or another, you did deal with it. Now, you might have dealt with it very well. You might have dealt with it very badly. But you ask yourself how you dealt with it, because I think it's important to learn from the past. Otherwise, we keep doing the same things over and over again. So we learn from what worked and we start to build on that. But we also have to learn from what didn't work. First of all, why did it not work? Secondly, can you rule it out? If it didn't work, is there a way of adapting it and changing it, or is it something you can rule out completely? So we learn from what works, but we also have to learn from what didn't work when we look back at those past situations that might be influencing us in the here. Well, it's not that they don't influence, or rather impacting us on in the here and now. The other thing about the emotional reasoning I would say is based on how we make decisions based on how we feel, as opposed to what it actually is, what the facts are, things like that. So whenever we look at those things in the past, if making emotionally based decisions wasn't working, is that something to rule out? And it doesn't mean you ignore your feelings, you ignore your emotions. You certainly allow them to inform you, but not make the decision for you. Going back, and the last thing I will say, and I mentioned it a moment ago, something we could be going through, something we could be thinking about, could be bringing up a lot of distress. Our anxiety could be heightening, anger could be heightening, all those different things we don't like to feel. A question we rarely ask ourselves is, what part of this am I open to accepting? Because the thing is, there are some things that are very painful. They might be embarrassing, they might be hurtful, there might be a lot of different things. What part of it am I open to accepting? You apply for that job, you don't get the job. That might be disappointing because you might have been really hoping to get that job. What part of that are you open to accepting? Well, you accept the fact that maybe someone else was more accomplished, or, they had more experience or something like that. Maybe you just didn't give a good interview on the day. It could be anything. When you accept, it's perfectly okay to be disappointed. That's a normal reaction to something like that. But then you look at what you can do differently next time. You maybe learn from that. So the next time you go for a job interview, you've learned from what went wrong the last time. The things that we cannot change, what part of that are you open to accepting? Well, maybe you're not superhuman. Maybe you don't have amazing psychic abilities. Maybe you can't do, again, difficult people in your life. You can't do Jedi mind tricks and stuff to change them, to fix them. When you feel anxious, stressed, well, again, you could be feeling anxious because you have a test, you have an exam, you might have a difficult conversation you're going to have. You're open to accepting the anxiety that might come with that, which is a normal reaction. Again, when we do that, we find that it doesn't necessarily go away, but what happens is it doesn't become so heightened that it's making the decision for us. So, quick drink. I'm used to other people talking. I do all the talking when I do the live streams. Used to other people doing the talking. That's just some unhelpful thinking habits. That's some ideas to maybe cognitively reframe, looking at things like evidence, acceptance, things like that, things you can change, things that you can't, learning from past experiences and so on. So I do hope there's been something useful in this for you. What I will say, and I do have some notes here that I would like to talk about, and that is on the 25th and on the 26th of May this month, I'm going to be in Liverpool. All right, our pet. I'm going to be in Liverpool. It's awful, wasn't it? That's a terrible impersonation of a Liverpool accent. I'm going to be talking at an event. It's been arranged by Richard Grannon. It's looking at narcissistic psychopathy, a global dark force. I'm going to be one of the speakers. There's a lot of different, yeah, it's going to be on. There's going to be different speakers there. So I'm going to run through them. First of all, there's Mark Vicente. Mark was a member of a cult. He's one of the whistleblowers on that cult, and he's going to be looking at the narcissistic psychopathic type and this innate need they have to try to create cult-like conditions around them. They either form cults, or even when they bring people into relationships with them, there's something very cult-like about it, the way they behave. So he's going to be talking about that from his own personal experience, but also looking at ways to help deprogram, which I often think sometimes people who have been in like narcissistic situations, like workplaces, maybe they grew up in a family, maybe they've been in a long-term relationship with a narcissistic person. It can sometimes feel like they're deprogramming for them, because of all the years worth of gaslighting and lies and manipulation and so on. So he's going to be looking at it from someone who was actually in a cult. He's going to be talking from personal experience, about the conditions that narcissistic people create around them. Sarah Davison is going to be there. Sarah Davison is known online as the divorce coach. She's going to be talking about how to break up with a narcissistic person, how to do it positively, and to be able to support yourself through that process. If someone is going through that kind of process, how to do it safely and how to support themselves. Professor Ed Dutton is going to be there, and he's going to be sharing his research from I'm getting tongue-tied here, so let me start this again. He's going to be sharing his experience from an evolutionary psychology perspective. He's going to be looking at some of the genetic elements involved with narcissism and borderline personality disorder. Dr. Paul Taylor is going to be talking. He's going to be talking about it from a philosophical approach. He's going to be looking at culture, literature rather. He's going to be looking at narcissism, psychopathy, things like that in myths, legends, the different archetypes, and some of the unconscious drives behind the behavior. Richard Grannon, he's going to be talking about recovery from narcissistic abuse from both an individual and at a cultural level as well. And then lastly, there's me. I'm going to be giving a wee chat too. I'll be walking about up and down stage as I do, talking, but I'm going to be talking about the narcissistic family unit and how I didn't coin the phrase. It's been talked about for years, but I do agree about how narcissistic families often operate like a cult. And that's when you have, the head of the family, the way I describe them. It's either she who must be obeyed, the matriarch, or you have the grand worshipful master, and that's the patriarch, and all the little roles that the kids get put into. What makes it like a cult, how it operates, the pseudo hostility, the pseudo mutuality, all the different stuff that goes on with it. I'm also going to be looking at ways to unravel. Again, just like Mark's going to be talking about the deprogramming yourself, I'm going to be talking about unraveling from that kind of dynamic, deprogramming ourselves from that kind of dynamic. I'm going to be talking about it on an individual level, but I'm also going to be talking about it from a therapeutic perspective as well. So that is on the 25th and 26th of May in Liverpool. The details can be found on Richard Grannon's website, which is, I do believe, richardgrannon.com. Need to check that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. richardgrannon.com. And as far as I'm aware, if you can't make it to Liverpool, I think it's going to be streamed live as well. So the details should all be on his website. So that's my big news for this evening. Now over to questions. So let's have a look. Go. Hello, Darren. Hello, on my way. Hello, psychic consultant. Hello, Laura. Hello, self-talk. MT says ruminating has taken so many hours, days, weeks, months. That is one I didn't mention, and that's a really good one. Rumination. Rumination is when we are going over the same thing again and again. Now, there are different reasons for this, because something could be very troublesome, something could be very shocking, something could be, really deeply ingrained into us. But I think the reason why we ruminate is because, as a rule, human beings do not like things that don't sit well. We do not like things that don't make sense. When we ruminate, we could be ruminate for many different reasons. It could be something over the past. It could be something that maybe hasn't happened yet. It could be something that we fear might happen. And again, just like we're going over the past, it's like we're trying to get a new piece of information. We're trying to get this new piece of information that will suddenly make things make sense. It's not that we can rewrite history. We might even be saying things like, well, damn, I wish I'd said this, or why did I do that? Or we're worried about something from the future. And again, we're saying, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Then I'm going to say, there are different ways to help with rumination. I think I talked about it. It was either on a live stream or it was on a video. I can't remember. But I did talk about it. So just to give a recap, first of all, you have to recognize you are ruminating. You're not necessarily getting any new information. What you're doing might be causing you even more distress. It might be keeping you stuck. And little ways you can help with that is to, when you find your mind wandering, if you get yourself into the habit of just reminding yourself of what you're doing in the moment, just start to pepper your day with just little things like, right now I'm brushing my teeth, right now I'm having a cup of tea, right now I'm going to walk the dog or something. You just pepper your day with little things like that. You get into the habit, because when you find your mind starts to wander and it's going back to something, you can bring yourself back into the present again, what you're doing right now. You can even start to recognize, right now I have the thought, right now I happen to remember, right now I happen to feel. The key term each and every time is right now. You're keeping yourself in the moment. It's not that you shouldn't think about these things, but again, it's keeping yourself in the moment and how you think about these things. You can also, some people find it helpful. It's not that they don't think about it, but what they do is, and this takes a bit of discipline, they decide to think about it. It just doesn't come into their head and their imagination starts running riot, or they start replaying the same thing. They make a conscious effort to think about it. What they might say earlier on is, right now I have the thought, and then go back to doing what they're doing. They don't push it out of their head, because it tends to get worse. They just allow it to go, and they go back to doing what they're doing. But they make a choice. I will think about it later on, maybe about 7 o'clock or something. I will think about it later on for 2 minutes. When that time comes, they can set their stopwatch, their time, or whatever it is, and they think about it. They start to think about that thing. Now, it might still be uncomfortable, it might still be distressing, but the difference is, this time they have control over it. Their imagination isn't running riot. They have control over it. And they're thinking about, once that timer stops, no, they just finish. They go back to doing what they're doing. A lot of the time when we're ruminating, we are chasing our thoughts. We're chasing our imagination. We're trying to keep up, and we're feeling a lot of distress whenever we actively choose to think about it, but only for a short period of time, and maybe think about it in a different way. It could be objectively, could be in a problem solving way, could be anything. When we decide to do that, we have more control. I'll stick with anxiety. It's the most common example. Anxiety is one of those things that will lead us to believe we have no control. Often as I say, there are things we don't have control over, but we have more control than we sometimes give ourselves credit for. So if that's of any help when it comes to the rumination, MT. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Adam. Zen says, I'm my own worst critic and an overthinker. There's nothing wrong with our internal critic, in the sense that it's good to have a healthy level of self-doubt. Otherwise, we're arrogant. Otherwise, we're going to do silly, crazy, stupid, reckless things. It's when that inner critic is always telling us we're going to fail and we're no good. That's when the critic maybe needs to be challenged, needs to be silenced. I did talk about this in a previous live stream about the inner critic, ways to deal with that. You might get a few more ideas there if you want to look at that. It's just, again, just trying to get that balance, the difference between healthy self-doubt and constant berating yourself. Linda says, don't take everything personal, stay in the moment. Yeah, some things aren't personal. Some things are very general. Some things aren't meant for us at all. It's whenever they are personal, even then, it's maybe how do we deal with it? Let me see. Where are we? Racid says, good evening, Darren. I have issues with seeing myself in a negative way, thinking I'm a loser, ugly, behind peers in life. What can I apply to help with thinking patterns? I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Forgive me, I'm from a strange part in the world and we do have an odd accent and we do pronounce things really weirdly. I say how instead of how. So I said, let me see. First of all, I'd be asking you, if you think you're a loser and you're ugly, maybe ask yourself, who's told you that? Whose voice is that? Again, that critic, it's not necessarily yours. You can compare yourself to others. Others may be more accomplished. They might be further up the corporate ladder or whatever it is. They might have a faster car or bigger house or whatever. I think comparing ourselves is just what we do. But it's whenever we compare ourselves unfavorably. That's the difference. We compare ourselves unfavorably as if there's something wrong with us. And a lot of the times when we are telling ourselves things like that, we're not telling ourselves things like, I could do better, I could try harder. What we're doing is we're telling ourselves, I'm just no damn good at anything. That is something that needs to be challenged. Now, what I would say about challenging that is you maybe have to prove yourself wrong somehow. Pay attention to the exceptions. There's been times when, let me see, what is it you're saying? Behind the peers in your life. At some point in your life, you've either been level with them or you've been ahead of them. And you may even find in different areas of your life that you may be more accomplished or you may have more experience, because we're not always at the same level. We're not all the same thing. We're not, there's like this little field of action figures that all look identical. No, we're all different. We all have different skill sets, ways of doing things, ways of trying things, and we're all at different levels. If you're comparing yourself to maybe someone, right, I'm not an athletic person. I'm bone idle and lazy. Walking, Freud here, is the only exercise I get. Giving away too much info here. But if I was to compare myself to, say, a Premiership footballer, well, you know what? I'm going to think I'm useless. I'm going to think I'm lazy. I'm going to think I'm no good. First of all, I can't play football. There's not a sporting bone in my body. I'm no good at sport. I never was. I'm the type of guy that throws something and it lands behind him. But if I was to compare myself to someone who is very athletic, yeah, I'm going to come off bad. I'm going to think I'm useless. We all have different skills, different ways. We have different ways of learning as well. Some people learn just by watching. They learn by hearing about it. They learn by reading about it. They learn by doing it. So it's not necessarily that you're no good at anything. You might just find whatever works for you, how you learn, how you do things. And you don't always have to work at the same pace as other people. That's the thing. You don't have to work at the same pace as other people. You're telling yourself you're ugly as well. That's subjective. Yeah. I mean, what is it to say? It's in the eye of the beholder. Even when you say ugly, are you talking about physically attractive? There's a lot of different ways of looking at that. But again, pay attention to the exceptions, because there's been times when, someone has found you attractive, someone's asked you out on a date, things like that. So there has been something that they have seen, or maybe you've asked someone out on a date and they said, yeah. So there have been exceptions, I'm guessing. There's always exceptions in some kind. If not, it might mean taking a risk to try to prove yourself wrong. And it's the thing about taking a risk. I always say, careful about taking a risk. Small, little, measured risks. Small, little, tiny steps. Not something rash or unreasonable. But whenever you risk anything, you try anything, you risk failing. That's the thing. But you also risk succeeding. So I hope that's useful for you. Record Hound says, it's ironic that a commercial just cut. Do you get commercials in this during the live streams? I didn't know that. Wow. You learned something new. Commercial just cut in singing about making things magic. Okay. Jamila says, tired with what I'm facing and my family. Yeah, some things can drain us. Some things can really wear us out. Absolutely. And I'm not sure what you're facing. But whatever it is you're facing, you think about maybe what are your alternatives? What can you do? What help and support is available? Utilize every bit of support you can get. Let me see. Sometimes you need to consider the source. Yeah, you consider the source where a lot of our anxiety and stress comes from. Whatever it is we're dealing with could be legitimate. It could be a real source of problem. We might have a deadline for something. It has to be done by Friday, and we're looking at it, and it's like a month's worth of work. That's going to bring up a lot of stress. We look at the actual source. Sometimes it's, as much as sometimes it is us, sometimes it's also the situation as well, or the environment that we're in. And it could be how we're dealing with it. It could be how we're reacting to it. It's never really a one size fits all. So yeah, it could be about the source. So let's move on. Record Hound again says, past experiences. That just jumped. Yeah. Past experience can only inform the future. The more I was proven wrong when I generalized, the more I became more open to changes. That's a really good example. You become open to being proved wrong. Again, if we're just assuming it is definitely this and it's not going to work, if we're not open to new information, again, narcissistic people tend to be low in openness. When you think of the 5-factor model of personality, they tend to be open, tend to be low in openness to experience and information, because it's like they've made their mind up. When we are open to new information, sometimes being proved wrong isn't a nice feeling, by the way, because we maybe had such certainty over something. But when we can be open to new information, we can learn new ways through and around things. We start to grow. Yeah, we also stop generalizing as well. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. George Orwell. I have recently just finished rereading 1984. I hadn't read it since, I think I was in my 20s the last time I read it. Yeah. I read it in and around the time they made the movie, the one with John Hurt in it and Richard Burton, which was made in about 1980-ish, 84, 85, something like that. Yeah, so it was a few years after that I reread. I've reread it again recently. And wow, there's so much in that book. Again, you think about the again, what we're going to be talking about at this conference. It's the cult-like mentality, the dismantling of the human brain and like reprogramming it, and that was done at a societal level. Absolutely powerful book. Yeah. Let me see. Where are we? Forgot this was live. Okay. Oh my, I'm so happy you and Richard are collaborating in this field. Yeah, it's odd how it came about. I might have mentioned this last time, but I would watch Richard's channel from time to time, and because there's always good information on it. I like his take on things. And what I like about him as well is he sticks to the source material, he sticks to the research and things like that. And he looks at his own experiences. He brings in a lot of different stuff. But he had put out a video where he was talking about him and Mark Vicente have together collaborated on this course to help people recover from narcissistic abuse, narcissistic relationships, cult-like dynamics that people find themselves in. And I just left a message saying I would be interested in more information, because I always like things to be able to signpost people to, and I don't like putting up people's courses and info without their consent. I like to ask them. And he said, yeah, send me the info. So, or, he's asked me to email him. So I emailed him, and he didn't just give me the info on the course. He actually gave me access to the course. And I must say, there is so much in it. Is so powerful. There's a lot of stuff in it. There's a lot of stuff a lot of people are going to find very, very helpful. Looking at how and why we find ourselves getting engaged and getting caught up in these things with these people, whether that is on a group level, whether in the workplace, families, different dynamics, friendship groups, even in personal relationships. The hows and whys we find ourselves not just getting caught up in them, but how we react, how and why we often react the way we do, and we behave the way we do, and what happens to us over a long period of time. But also looking at how to untangle ourselves from it, to really get a sense of ourselves again. There's a lot of stuff in it. So again, go on to his channel, go on to his website. There's a link to the course that him and Mark are doing together. To give you an idea, if you go onto his channel, or even onto Mark Vicente's channel, you can see the two of them talking about some of this stuff, and it'll give you an idea of the level that they go into, the depth that they go into. It's really, really good information. I don't want to go into too much detail, obviously, but it is really, really good stuff. So yeah, from that, then he, as I was looking at his stuff, he asked if I would be interested in talking at this. So yeah, and that's how I ended up there. So yeah, I'm gonna meet some interesting people, as well as get to talk to some interesting people. So right, thank you, Darren. I appreciate your suggestions and insight. Oh, you're welcome. Glad you find it helpful. The important thing is you do find it helpful. Blue Hutch says it's good advice. Good. Glad you had it. Be great to see even from here in Canada. Yeah, as I say, if you go on to his website, I think it is going to be, and it's going to be uploaded at some point, but I think it's being streamed live. So if you go onto his website, the details should all be in that. I'm sure Liverpool is a long way from Canada. You might not get the afternoon off to attend, if you know what I mean. So yeah. Getting commercials as well. There is something when I set up a live stream, it does say something about the commercials. I always assume that the commercials are afterwards when it gets uploaded itself. And I think there's one at the beginning when I start. I kind of know that much. And if I come to the end of it, I think there's one at the end of it. I didn't actually know there were ones through it. So I will have a look. I don't know if it bothers people. Maybe you don't want to listen to me waffle on for too long. Might be good to have a break. You can go and get a cup of tea or have a quick smoke or whatever it is you do. I don't know. But if it bothers people, I found out recently how to reduce the number of ads and things. I hadn't known that for a long time, and then I'd found out how to do it, and then I forgot all about it until someone commented about, yeah, there's too many ads. So I thought, yeah, so I need to do that. But now I know that there's ads happening in live. If people are okay with it, I'll just leave it. I don't see any, but I'm the one that's waffling. But if not, then I'll try and take them out, and they'll just come into it whenever it gets automatically uploaded. So where did we get to? Growing up with a level of coercive control, struggling letting people in my home. Housing association needs to carry out safety checks. I have two issues. I'm not sure what those issues are. If it's about trust. Oh, sorry, I've just seen here. Losing the main place I feel safe, dealing with the triggers about people manipulating and abusing me. Again, these things can become deeply ingrained, and one of the things we do is, again, is the generalizing. We assume that everybody is going to treat us that way. It's worth paying attention to the people who don't. There are people in your life, I'm sure, a Mac, I'm not sure the words, but there are people who are decent with you. There are people who treat you with courtesy. They don't always agree with you. They don't always, give you everything you want. They don't necessarily, collude, or whatever term you want to use. But they can disagree, and they can do it in a decent way, in a healthy way, without calling you names or something. They're not necessarily trying to coerce, and they might be trying to convince you of something, but that's not the same as trying to coerce you. They still will respect your yes or your no. It's worth paying attention to those. If we don't pay attention to those exceptions, we will assume everything is going to be the same way, or everyone is going to behave the same way. So, let me see. I'm about to leave a highly toxic workplace. I learned to deal with it. It's been like this for 7 years, but I do wonder, is it possible to have workplace related trauma, or CPTSD? Well, what I would say is CPTSD. It's like any kind of disorder. That is something that's diagnosable. It's a diagnosable condition. Now, what we can have is we can be in a state of traumatic stress, because we could be in a situation that's really not healthy for us and really not good for us. We can even have we can be in a state of post-traumatic stress. In other words, we've come out of it, but we still think about it, to some level. It's still having an effect. What tends to happen in the majority of cases, I'm thinking in terms of something like, say, a very, very quick example, like a car accident. It was dangerous, got a little bit hurt, wasn't too bad. It's not that we were hospitalized or something. But we can be in a state of post-traumatic stress, in the sense that we're hyper vigilant. We're worried about, if we get into the car again, we're very nervous on the road. We might be driving a lot slower. We find things like, our dash disrupted, our sleep's disrupted, and that's going to last for maybe 4-6 weeks, something like that, maybe 10 weeks, but things level out. And sometimes we can come out of a toxic environment. It can be the same thing. Things start to level out. Other times we come out of something and it's like it stays with us. It's like part of us is stuck there. And you mentioned CPTSD. In other words, it's complex. If it was going on for 7 years, chances are it wasn't a one-off event. There was a series of events. What I would say is, if you're out of that environment, take a bit of space, catch your breath, get to know yourself, take things easy for a bit, but also start to utilize and engage with some of the healthy relationships in your life. Again, there is something to be said whenever we're treated decently, whenever we're valued, we're not being coerced, bullied, lied to, things like that. It's worth engaging with those. I think a good place to start for anyone who's unsure, uncertain, and they've been through something really uncomfortable is actually seeing a therapist. Talk to a therapist. Talk to a counselor, psychotherapist, to help make sense of what happened, to help unpick what happened. Sometimes you need someone to tell you, yeah, that was a load of, you might have said something that got me sort of demonetized there. Yeah, that wasn't healthy. That wasn't good. You need someone to, to actually maybe call it what it is, but also someone that's going to help you to try to navigate a way forward. It's, remember, going back to the rumination, it doesn't make sense to us. Now, this is the thing about counseling, which I've noticed about counseling. People go to counseling and therapy for many, many different reasons. But usually it comes down to something needs to change. Something's not working. Something's not good. Something has caused a lot of distress. I need to find a way through or a way around. I need to make sense of this. Something has to change. Not the majority. Okay, it depends on the therapist, I guess. The majority of the people that I've worked with over the years have come to me because of other people in their lives. Other people in their lives that have treated them very, very badly. Treated them with contempt. They've been absolutely horrid to them. Human beings, again, don't like things that don't make sense. When you're a good person, you're decent, you try hard, you try to be honest, you do your best, and people still treat you badly. That does not sit well. That is not good. That messes with our head. Because human beings do not like malice. We do not like cruelty. Even the people that commit these things, even the people that do these things, if they were to happen to them, they wouldn't be able to take it. They wouldn't be able to handle it. They wouldn't sit there and go, oh, you see that? I do that too. Don't worry. No, they would not be able to handle it, because human beings cannot deal with other people's cruelty, malevolence, and all the rest of it. That's what I often think we're ruminating over. What the hell is wrong with someone that they would behave like this? You do your best for someone, they throw it back in your face. They treat you very, very badly. Going to talk to a counselor, going to talk to a therapist it can help unpick some of that. And I don't know if this is the right way of putting it, but help make sense of things that don't bloody make sense. We have to sometimes accept some people are what they are. They do what they do, and that's it. They are not for changing. One of the things I talked about in a video recently is whenever people are bullying and things like that, what you often find is they only do it in certain situations, and usually when either there's no one else present or they're their own enablers, they're flying monkeys, they're useful idiots. Whenever they're present, that's the only time they do it. If they're going to face consequences, they generally don't. So what you're probably dealing with, as uncomfortable as it is you're probably dealing with cowards. Again, it's a very general thing. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I'm just being very general about it. But if you think it would help, by all means, I say the first thing to do is maybe find a therapist to talk to make sense of it. But also, once you're out of that situation, take a little bit of time to catch your breath and start to utilize all of the healthy relationships you have around you, because I always think the antidote to really unhealthy, toxic people is actually good people. It's decent people. It's being a part of something. It's being being valued. It's being encouraged and all that. You surround yourself with people that bring out the best in you, that you feel good to have a laugh with, feel good to just be yourself with. Okay, and last one is Darren, as much as I always say, why does a scorpion sting? When explaining narcissistic people, I really can't understand how this strategy has long-term viability. Seems generational. Long-term viability, I don't think it does, in the sense that, and again, being very general, cases are different, people are different. I think narcissism by its very nature is destructive. Ultimately, it is self-destructive. Narcissistic people tend to have this unhealthy relationship with reality, shall we say. They believe they are special, they are powerful, they are entitled, and all the rest of it. And the length they go to get what they think they're entitled to, instead of maybe just putting the bloody effort in, instead of working for it, trying to earn it, the lengths they go to is ultimately self-destructive. This is the thing about, again, the cult-like mentality of a narcissistic person. They try to recreate the world around them, the people around them. They idealize things and they try to recreate things in their own image, the version of what they think it should be, and ultimately they can't, because everybody's different. We're not that controllable unless you're reading 1984 again. And because they can't, that's when you get the hissy fits. That's when you get the tantrums. That's when you get them rolling about in the floor, clutching their throat and screaming, "Oh my God, you said no to me. I'm going to die. The world might as well end." They destroy relationships. They destroy people. They destroy workplaces. They destroy community groups, little church groups, families, environments. They destroy everything, trying to recreate it in what they believe is their perfect image of what they think things should be. Ultimately, it's self-destructive, because sooner or later, everybody's onto them. They outstay their welcome. You can't hide toxicity for long. So ultimately, I think they end up destroying themselves. It's not a viable strategy, but you're dealing with someone, as I say, who has this really unhealthy relationship with reality. They think what they're doing it works. They're entitled to do it. It's the best thing to do. They don't know anything else to do. Narcissistic people also don't have a good relationship with humility. They don't do humility well. They struggle at the thought of someone else knowing something they don't, being able to do something they can't, to be more accomplished or successful in a certain area than they are. And often that's when the envy and the jealousy kicks in. So, yeah, it's not viable. But I would also agree that a lot of it is learned. There can be a genetic factor, and that's something that Ed Dutton's going to be talking about. There can be a genetic factor, but I believe personally, what would I know? But I think a lot of it is just learned behavior. So I would agree with you on that. Above Pink says, it answered my question. You were absolutely spot on with everything. They are covert cowards. I'll take the time, talk to my therapist, and get back to my people. It's good. Good for you. Well done, Above Pink. And last one, because I realize I'm over time again. D, I'm going through that. I never experienced a narcissist until now. In my 30s, through life so far without this, and absolutely draining, heartbreaking. We all experience narcissism at some level, especially when we're younger, especially when we're teenagers. You know, we have this need to be cool, to hang out with the cool kids and to have the latest whatever. You know, we do have that in us, I guess. What we don't have is the toxic kind of narcissism. And there are some narcissistic people you meet, and they're not. I know this is going to fly in the face of a lot of the stuff I put out at my channel. They're not necessarily bad people. They might just be pests. All they want is your attention. They want you to listen to how amazing they are. You know, they want you to admire their new car. You know, sometimes that's what you're dealing with. But it's whenever you get it, and it's really ramped up. It's almost like really dialed up high. It's almost through the ceiling. The narcissism, and quite often you get other things comorbid with it as well. That's why more recently I'm talking about the dark tetrad, because there's not just the narcissism, you have the psychopathy, and that's being really callous. They're cold and they're cruel, and they really don't care about who they hurt or what they hurt. They're very manipulative, Machiavellianism. They're very manipulative. They're duplicitous. The end justifies the means. Whatever lie, doesn't matter. As long as it gets me what I want. It's true in this moment. The moment, you know, what I'm telling you right now in my head at this very moment, it's true. But stay on your toes, because 5 minutes from now, it's going to change. I'll have changed my mind, and I'll now have a new version. So they're very, very manipulative. But then there is also in the last part, and this is where I think a lot of people really struggle with this, because, and why wouldn't you? There's the sadistic side, sadism, and there's different ways that can manifest. But the two ways of looking at sadism, the sadistic element of the dark personality, is they either take pleasure from the pain and misery of other people. It's like they get a kick out of it. They love seeing people in distress. They love to see them flounder, even just to the degree where someone is really struggling, they're frustrated, they're trying to explain themselves, and they're not. You know, I don't understand. What was the question again? Oh, look, a thing. You know, they're getting a kick out of watching someone really, really struggle. So they either behave in a very, very cruel way and they're enjoying themselves, or it's just a means to an end in order to keep control. They don't necessarily get joy from it. They just behave in a very cruel way because it gives them domination and control. Sometimes it's actually both. They enjoy doing it in order to get control. So I think a lot of the time when we're talking about narcissism, used to be the dark triad people would talk about. I would say that's still true, but I do still think that there's that sadistic element as well sometimes, which would be the cruelty. And that's why I talk more about the dark tetrad these days. When I'm talking about, when I go to Liverpool, when I'm talking about the narcissistic family, I will be doing it from the perspective of the dark tetrad. I'll be talking about, how the narcissistic parents, how they dominate and control. So it's not just the narcissism, we're special, we're unique, look at us, aren't we amazing, we're the best family in the street. There's also the psychopathy, there's the callousness, and I'm going to be talking about how that manifests among the kids, towards the kids. I'm going to be talking about the manipulation, not just the manipulation of the family, the partner, and so on, but even the world around them, that false image that they present. And I'm also going to be talking about the cruel side, the sadistic, which usually occurs whenever someone starts to speak up, starts to recognize this is nonsense, this is not real, this is insane, other families aren't like this, and maybe try to leave, and even how they react and treat other people outside of their own little cult. So, come to an end tonight, and I would thank everyone for joining me again this evening. I hope that the unhelpful thinking habits, as I say, there's lots I haven't mentioned. They were just very, very general ones, and again, some ideas on how to challenge them, if you will. So, just before I end, who wants to say hello to Freud? Hey, buddy, you awake? Do you want one of these? Do you? Do you want one of these? Do you want to pop up and say hello to everyone? There you go. Oh, can't see him, can he? You can see his wee head there. Come on, you get climb up and say hello to everybody. 1, 2, 3. Oh, you're such a brute. Wrecking the place. Here he is, everybody. I did promise he might make a guest appearance. You want that? Oh, look at that. He gets himself a treat. Such a handsome boy. He's got my brains, Oh, yes, indeed. Oh, yes. He was a very good boy tonight. He was doing what he always does. He was just having a wee nap on the carpet. Do you want another one? I'm sure you do. There you go. There you go. He's been such a good boy. He gets 2 treats. Would you do it for a Scooby snack? You go and catch that ghost for a Scooby snack? Right. Say bye-bye to everybody. Wave your paw. He's not going to perform. Right, down you get. Down you get, matey. Oh, he's not going to get down either. Right, okay. So, on that note, I won't be seeing you on Sunday night. That's why I was doing it tonight instead. So I will be back definitely in 10 days' time this time. And it will... Oh, I might actually be in Liverpool that weekend. It's 25th and 26th. I definitely won't be doing a Sunday night that night. But if that's the case, I'll have to make it another Wednesday. But either way, as always, everybody, look after yourselves, take care, and thanks for joining me again. Hey, settle down, you.